And now, Pushyami Gogireddi and the ringleaders of time. Lorna? Hangman woke suddenly from a sound sleep to find his beloved was no longer beside him. He found her just outside the cave, sitting on a log in the moonlight, with her legs tucked closely towards herself, and rocking slightly as if in an attempt of self-comfort, though it seemed she was not achieving her goal. Lorna! Henwin rushed towards her. What's wrong? Oh, Henwin! Lorna began to weep as she threw her arms around him, and she snuggled into her, doing her best to comfort her as he could. It was awful, just dreadful. What was, my dear? Henwin questioned soothingly. What happened that frightened you so? A horrible creature, cried Lorna, trying to make me forget. She continued to weep on his shoulder. Oh, Lorna, Lorna, soothed Henwin. What a creature would want to do any harm to someone such as you? I don't know, wept Lorna, but I have the most horrible feeling that he's why I can't remember what happened in Dublin. If only I had stayed and asked Jubal for help. Who's Jubal? Asked Henwin, sitting beside her. He wanted to accompany me all the way back home to Jangle, sighed Lorna, but I would not let him. Oh, I was too afraid of what he'd think if he knew I couldn't remember my last name or my loved ones. She wept freely against his shoulder and Henwin drew closer in a protective embrace. I told him to go back to Dublin, Lorna confessed, because I thought I could make it on my own. How wrong I was. Lorna shook her head in deep regret. I told the cab driver to take me to the church because it was the only place I truly felt safe. Oh, thank goodness you did, smiled Henry as he held her close, because if you hadn't, we would have never found you there when we did. He paused for a moment. Why did you seek sanctuary in the ruins of an old churchyard? We used to have ceremonies there, said Lorna, smiling a little through her tears. The other daughters of Dingle and I. What kind of ceremonies? Questioned Hedwig. We would honor the great gods and goddesses of old, sighed Lorna, and provide offerings of food and drink to them in hopes of receiving their wisdom in return. Sounds lovely, nodded Henry. Reminds me of the ceremony that you and I were a part of back at Dingle. 'Twas beautiful, smiled Lorna, and she kissed him on the cheek. A shadow crossed over her face as if she sat for a moment, thinking deeply. Then she shivered as though she had a chill. I only wish I could remember more. In time, nodded Edwin encouragingly. You will. I'm sure of it. Now, my dear, come back to sleep, and I'll sing you a lullaby. If, even a cat can say you said it. Even a feline can decline and say I don't want her. Even in past when they gave credit, not even of wine, grand design. You know well I'm gonna, Ariana. I've never slept outside before, Lorna admitted shyly. But there's something about sleeping on the floor of a cave that feels so strangely familiar. Perhaps you're remembering another lifetime. Here, Edwin placed a kiss upon her cheek. I felt the same exact way, to be honest. You have? Lorna looked at him in surprise. Indeed, and without a faraway look in his eyes. Oh, I had never felt so at home anywhere as I did thousands of years ago. How strange, Lorna giggled at the thought. You, a flying trapeze artist. Oh, I didn't do all of that, grinned Edwin. What? Well, I did do a balancing act, lots of tumbling and twirling. Sounds like fun. Lorna wiped her eyes. You know, normally I'd be desperate to get out of such a situation, but she smiled. I really don't want to leave. Neither do I, grinned Edwin, who, for the moment, felt completely and utterly content. and with her hand in his, they both returned to bed and fell into a deep and peaceful sleep, and Lorna was no longer afraid to dream. Who goes there? A voice rang out to the entrance of the cave, echoing all around as if it was everywhere all at once. Edwin awoke with a start, as did everyone else, to find a gathering of intruders at the mouth of the cave. Who said you could use our cave? A rumbling, booming voice demanded. Your cave? Edwin shook with sudden fear as the figures drew closer, and suddenly he found himself face to face with a bear. Ah! Cried Edwin, and jumped back with a start. A bear! And suddenly, to Edwin's amazement, the bear began to speak. What do you want with our cave? Boomed the bear. I'm dreaming, said Edwin as he shut his eyes tight. I'm dreaming, I'm dreaming, I'm dreaming. You are not, exclaimed the bear, and with a gigantic paw cuffed Edwin across the shoulder as he took flying, his body narrowly missing, slamming himself against the wall with brute force. Edwin! Lorna cried out in shock, and the bear turned towards her with vengeful eyes. Stop! A voice cried out, and miraculously a talking bear paused mid-attack. Are you your friends? Cried out the voice. Do not harm them. Hangman, and even as his deep daze recognised the voice of such in time, he had gone for firewood, only to find his troop go bear with us, descending upon the group of travellers as though they were going to be soon to be a meal. These are intruders, exclaimed Bear in Mind. They have entered our sacred space without invitation. They were invited, B.I.M., replied Stitch tearfully. By me! By you, growled Bear in Mind. They are in fact the very same who chasing us to Glasgow. We meant no harm, insisted Pushyami. We only wanted to know why you were there. Bull hockey, exclaimed the one called Fungus among us, as his small assistants noticed that super moles gathered together with reputation at his feet. You were trying to capture us. Nonsense, returned Pushyami. I only wanted to talk with you. Wait a second, exclaimed the one who called himself Temperature Teapot. She's glowing. Oh, said the other, who called himself under the weather. She must be the one who was aforementioned in the prophecy. Pushyami paused and stared down at them both. Did you just say prophecy? She echoed with surprise, and she turned towards the bear. Is he really a bear? It's really her, sire, whispered Fungus among us to bear in mind. For sure, it's her. It's got to be. Fungus among us was getting more excited by the moment. She's the one we've been waiting for. The bear slowly turned as if to leave, grumbling to himself. Can't be. Just look at her, sire, whispered Tempest in the teapot. She's glowing the green as you. And bear in mind turned then to give Pushyami Gogireddi a long and lingering stare, and Pushyami had never before in her life seen a bear look so startled, or perhaps so human. It is you, the bear spoke to her with such clear diction it was unnerving. Pushyami almost backed away in fear, as though it seemed the danger had passed. You, the bear continued, the infamous Miss Pushyami Gogireddi. Infamous? Pushyami laughed. Now she knew she must be dreaming. I wouldn't say that. Oh, sure you are, smiled Stitch. You discovered the missing pages of the Book of Cows. You sent a message to the time computer. I, Pushyami stopped in her tracks and stared at him almost speechlessly. I did what? Perhaps 50 years from now, said Stitch, you, dear, are the one who is called upon to send one of the most important messages ever told to all of humanity, and 'tis these three epiphanies, from once received by the right listeners, are the one of the key elements which drive those ready to take action and to single-handedly prevent the destruction of the human race. Goodness gracious, Pushyami had to take a seat. Why me? Why, indeed, Stitch grinned at her. You're an invaluable asset to our survival, Miss Gogireddi. That much is certain. Miss P. And we sat with mouth agape, only to rush towards her and throw his arms around her with abandon. You're the hero of the day. Oh, but Pushyami struggled for words. I haven't done anything. Nonsense, blushed Lorna, as she too hugged Pushyami tight. You're a legend. Oh, stop it, Pushyami laughed, but she was nearly weeping tears of joy. So Edwin turned towards the troop before him. Here are the rest of 'em, eh? Rest of, repeated Tempest to the teapot, leaning towards his partner under the weather. What's he on about? Rest of who? The travelling tricksters, grinned Edwin. The ones who created the circus of life. Aha! The bear turned towards Edwin, and Edwin was almost certain that the bear was smiling at him. So, you know our story, do you? Sire, whispered Tempest. He's the Mini, sire. Don't you remember? He's part of the prophecy, too. Mini? Edwin looked appalled by the notion. How did you say? Before he could protest any further, Pushyami and Lorna burst out laughing. Edwin gave them a dirty look, but softened when Lorna came and threw her arms around him. Course you are, sweetheart, she giggled. But we'd love you just the same. Wiping her eyes, she tried hard to stop laughing. Pushyami turned towards the troop. How did you all begin a circus? Why, said Tempest, we didn't. But they did. He pointed at Edwin and Stitch at Tom. Oh, right, Edwin laughed. He led Pushyami and Lorna right over to the cave drawings. See, these are us, beamed Edwin proudly. These commemorated us by carving out our legacy. We thought it was you, grinned Pushyami, when the other Edwin was here. Other? Barren mind stared at her. Edwin. Oh, right. Edwin frowned contemplatively. About that, what's the deal with him again? Maybe Lorna went deep into thought. He's the one who created all these things you didn't. Who's she going on about? Tempest looked alarmed. There's more than one of you. There's more than one of all of us, Tempest. Grinned Stitch in time. Remember? There's multiple universes and dimensions out there. Far more than just this one. Right, he is, nodded under the weather. Look, in one dimension, did you and I, we never became business partners, but as we are now, we're always two partners of a kind. You two are, Buscemi stared in shock. Personally involved? Well, you see, under the weather blushed back at her shyly. I ducked in his chin. Well, we prefer to say, romantically, he grinned at Tempest. Don't we, T? Why, yes, Tempest beamed back at his partner affectionately. We do. See, we were both meteorologists and the top of our field before we met each other. But once we did meet, we realised it was kismet. You see, I have the power to control the weather. Wait a moment, Hanwin gasped. So it was you that started the grain in the casino? Yes, nodded Tempest. 'Twas I indeed, and under the weather had a most usual infliction, where the weather follows him constantly. So it's destiny we were able to meet, 'cause I'm able to lower the electromagnetic fields around him that brew the right amount of atmospheric temperature, so he no longer has to control the storm clouds hovering above him day and night. Bless you, my love, beamed under the weather. You're a lifesaver, you are. Oh, they kissed each other and fell into a swoon. And you, Pushyami addressed, Ungus Among Us, are those leaves glowing out of your arms and shoulders? Yes, they are, Miss. Fungus stood proudly. I'm actually a product of nuclear explosion by the book. Oh my goodness, startled Pushyami. Do you mean to say you're radioactive? Well, 'tis complicated story, but no, naturally. No, I'm not. Being fungus, I was actually created in a lab by one of the name of David Eleanor. I know, David. Pushyami exclaimed with shock. Really, Fungus looked amazed, which was of course no easy feat for a land-grown human fungus. But how is it even possible? He's growing leaves, whispered Hanwin to Lorna, and he's asking Mrs. P how it's possible she knows David Eleanor. Well, this is a bit of a long story, said Pushyami, and we are more acquaintances than colleagues. Though please, my friend, she encouraged excitedly, do go on. So Professor Delanor and his co-workers were looking for a way to radioactively consume radioactivity itself and to separate from the environment in an environmentally sound way. And that's when he invented me, being Fungus, and the name Fungus Among Us just naturally accompanied me. We also call him Gus for short, added Tempest to the teapot, and Fungus sometimes added under the weather for good measure. And other times he prefers to be called Augustus Gustafson, Grim Tempest, just because it's fun like he is. And he explained of Henwin and Lorna's startled look. So, Pushyami was still trying to wrap a brain around it all. You're orange radioactive? Right, smiled Fungus. Though, you might avoid touching me. I'm not sure exactly if I'm in the process of digesting radioactive disintegration, which, he added quickly, though if I am, you're still safe to be near me, thanks to David Eleanor and friends. He paused, by the way. 'Twas his vision that I only use my radioactive principles for good instead of bad, and I could use myself as a type of self-contained greenhouse effect, which then I turn into my own seedlings of joy and plankton wherever I go. How wonderful being Pushyami. He's quite an extraordinary chap, isn't he, that Delanor? She couldn't help but muse aloud. Indeed, being Fungus among us, just as a bunch of super moles ran up behind him and crowded around. And who are these little guys? Lorna bent down to pat one of the super moles on the head. He shied away first, but then he scratched a bit behind his ear. The super mole had never felt such relief. He began to purr with gratitude, and soon the other 8 super moles had wanted to scratch between their ears, and Henwin and Pushyami joining in the front. It was a scrub fest of the highest order. Those are the super moles, Fungus among us beamed down at him with such affection as he thought he might burst. They are the assistants of mine, every one of them. He grinned at his friend, thanks to Stitch in Time. Well, you know what they say, grinned Stitch. Stitch in Time saves 9. Yes, smiled Fungus among us. You saved them from complete annihilation for the power grid. Thank you. The new 9 Super Bowls in turn rubbed themselves affectionately against Stitch's legs. They reminded Hagman a bit of a cross between a cat and some kind of strange mole creature. We're so glad you finally made it to our cave of Cabaret, beamed Stitch, and now we will amaze you by putting on a magic act of mystical mastery. He turned towards the others. Fellows, roll out the red carpet and light on the torch, and we are putting on a show. The Whimsy family lived near the Woodies Park on Budhill Road, part of the Broodholm surgery of the Silver City, affectionately known as the Granite City of Aberdeen. Their house was much older than it seemed to the others, a bit removed, darker in colour, and almost in shadow. However, Gita could not help but feel welcome somehow. She and the others waited from the stoop while Sister Blythe came forward and rang the bell. A woman, probably in her late 50s, approached the door. It seemed as she was a tad bit wary, but once she recognized Sister Blythe and the other 2 sisters standing by, she was all smiles and burst forth with a hug for them all. Oh, sisters, gushed this woman, it's been too long, my loves. Yes, yes, indeed it has. Sister Blythe wiped her eyes, not with tears of sadness, but tears of joy, for she had known Abigail Whimsy for quite some time. How is Mirabelle? She asked. Oh, she's right inside, beamed Abigail, and she'll be so pleased to see you. She stopped at the sight of the others. These must be the others, she said, and held out her hand to Gita. Pleased to make your acquaintance. I'm Abigail Whimsy. She paused for a moment, regarding Gita carefully. Gita began to step out a little, wondering if she should be afraid. However, Abigail's smile grew wide with such joy that she began smiling too. You're from these parts, are you? Well, Gita blushed and glanced at Henry. No. These are our friends Hugh and Hanwin Hugstein, introduced Sister Blythe. And this is Arthur Osborne, detective of the supernatural. Welcome. Abigail placed two hands on either side of Gita's shoulders as though with pride and smiled brightly. Please, all of you, do come inside. She held the door open for them all and eagerly rushed them in. I've made us some tea. This is a family favourite as well as my family recipe. The family famous dandelion root. I wonder if it's hers as good as Felix Finnegan's, whispered Hugh to Arthur, who snickered a little in turn. Turned out Arthur was wrong, for Abigail Whimsy's tea was better than the rest of the herbal tea he'd ever tasted. It soothed his palate like no other, and soon the detective found himself so relaxed he was nearly nodding off in his seat. Arthur! Hugh startled him with a nudge out of his stupor. Perhaps now would be the time to exchange gifts. What's that? Henwin brightened. It's Christmas now, is it? No, you nitwit, Henwin laughed, and you did too. I mean the object of interest from the supernatural confidence. Oh, right. Arthur dug into his bag and retrieved the witch's ball he'd been given guardianship over, which for some reason he suspected was significant to this particular family, as Abigail's ancestors had been accused of witchcraft. Oh, my lord! Abigail retrieved the item with tears in her eyes. Where did you get this? 'Twas a supernatural conference in Glasgow, my dear. Arthur smiled sleepily. Sir Arthur. Abigail stared at the detective in wonder. And we have been searching for this object for ages. For you see, this once belonged to my dear grandmother. She bowed her head in honor of her grandmother's spirit. God rest her soul. We know, nodded Arthur, for she spoke to us before she was released from the container you hold before you. Oh, gasped Abigail. She was released? What on earth are you saying? I liberate trapped spirits from their cages of self-confinement, Arthur explained. She was stuck there ever since her incineration. She only wished for her desires to be heard and acknowledged, for that she had been denied respect and every good-hearted human being deserves. Good sir! Abigail held her torture close. Maribel, who also had tears in her eyes and was speechless. Both were equally moved. You have done us a great service. How can we ever repay you? You, my dear, smiled Arthur, so as he kissed the backs of their hands with great affection, are the only one who could provide us with the information we need to find Pushyami and Lorna. I will do my best. Abigail wiped her eyes. Do you have any objects in the car? And do you have any objects that can connect us? We got this, and Wynne handed her the bag. I see. Abigail gazed down at it, holding the bag close, closing her eyes. Suddenly, she began to go into a bit of a trance as she felt her sway slowly back and forth, back and forth. Then her eyes opened, but she seemed not to be staring at them, but staring at something far off into the distance. Perhaps she was seeing nothing at all, or everything at once. You must travel to Caledonia, she said. In the highlands of old Scotland, there is a cave of majestic mystery which contains the answers you were seeking. This magician cave of mastery, that will provide you all you need to know. And this is where those two are sheltering. This is where they have found sanctuary from those who could do them harm. Caledonia, whispered Henry. Does she mean the Cairngorms National Forest? She must, whispered Hugh. That's the only Caledonia I know. They have joined there with a group of supernatural magicians, said Abigail. And now for the next part. Shortly and short sleeves go together like Lorna and warm tea. Those who know the secret of the mind, the heart, the soul, ones who sustain the tradition of the ages, the ones who perform the wonders of the world with grace and ease, do not be afraid, for they will be there to welcome you with open arms, just as those in Quarth will be there to welcome thee into their sacred space of sanctuary, the inner realms of the earth and beyond, where you will behold all there is to behold, all see all there is to see, learn all there is to learn about yourself in this world. You will be forever the ones you seek to be, and once you return from this most mystical realm, you will never be the same. After a moment of complete and utter silence, Abigail opened her eyes. Did that answer your question, she asked? Why, yes, said Sister Blythe, amazed by the thoroughness of the message. I do believe it does. And she stood and embraced Abigail. Thank you, dear heart, for you have given us a gift of the highest order. All thanks to my gift that I was bestowed upon by my lineage, smiled Abigail, wishing I pass on to this one. And she hugged Mirabelle, who had been extremely quiet up until now. She walked up towards Gita. Are you from India? She asked shyly. I am, yes, smiled Gita, as politely as she could. Are you related to Miss Pushyami? No, sighed Gita. But you are connected, said the young woman, who couldn't have been more than 12. I see you have much in common, and might as well be one and the same. Please forgive my daughter, said Abigail hastily as she drew Mirabelle back from towards her. She's a bit forward with her thoughts and does not pick well on social cues. Mother, Mirabelle whined. I'm sorry, she apologised to Gita. I only speak as I say the truth. That's quite all right, said Gita, who was not offended. So she smiled at Mirabelle, who avoided her eyes shyly. You're gifted too, I see. I am, said Mirabelle. So I've been told, she paused. Are you too gifted? Gita thought about it. Was she gifted? She'd had visions before, and she sometimes could tell others with where they were thinking with little effort. She'd had dreams that had come true, and when she followed her hunches, she was often right. Perhaps was all she allowed. I was developing my senses. Aren't we all, love? Laughed Abigail, putting a gentle arm around her. And we are so very glad you're here. Thank you, Gita blushed, though she wasn't used to feeling so welcome. And when meanwhile had come in from the porch, and behind him, to everyone's surprise, a little creature was following him. It was a black cat. It was mewing something urgently, as though it were hungry, but also wanted affection. My goodness! Exclaimed Gita. Oh, laughed Abigail with some amusement. Oh, this is just our little friend, Bartholomew. He's a stray cat that can sometimes come to us to be fed, and he typically doesn't warm up to strangers quite so quickly. I was just outside having a bit of fresh air, said Henry, and he just came up to me crying. I said, what's that you to mewling, little mewling cat? And he just stopped crying, and I picked him up and I was going to pet him, and now he's following me everywhere I go. Sounds like you've got yourself a feline, grinned Hugh. Or of a familiar, giggled Mirabelle. Familiar how? Exclaimed Henry, who remained stuck in the old armchair as the cat was clambering all over him. I'd never seen him before in my life, but now he's all I could see. Noshing at a bowl of pistachios, Hanwin could see that his new-found cat eyeing him with jealous approval, prompting Hanwin to begin singing. My cat can't stand that I have pistachios. My cat can't stand that I have pistachios. He was looking at me like I have three heads, and each of those heads was eating pistachios. My cat can't stand that I have pistachios. My cat can't stand that I have pistachios. Not two heads, but three. He was looking at me. So Henwin Abigail grinned at the man whose face was now covered with cat. Or are you going to tell him who you really are? Pardon, came the ruffled reply, and deep behind the cat fur. Who I really am? Yes, nodded Abigail, who you really are. Oh, Edmund paused. I see. His silence was unnerving and gave everyone pause. Son, asked Hugh, what does she mean by that who you really are? Well, Hanwin sat up at attention, and Bartholomew, suddenly startled, dropped down into his lap. There the cat simply turned around three ways in a circle, settled in, and began to purr. Okay, said Hanwin, as though he was completely avoiding meeting any eyes, yet he was still hesitant to follow through. Son, Hugh was on the edge of his seat, staring straight at him, now at full alert. Okay, Edwin took a brief. Oh, well, he took another deep breath, and he began again. I'm not. He took another deeper breath. Who do you think I am? You're not? Hugh was unequivocally confused. Oh, uh, I'm Henwin. I'm an interdimensional time traveler. He blurted out all at once. I'm an alternate version of your son, Henwin, and I've come here as a visitor from another dimension. Pardon, Hugh muttered. What's that you say? Well, I'm a interdimensional time traveler. Nonsense. Hugh jumped to his feet, gaping at Henwin in shock. That's impossible. Nonsense. Hugh jumped to his feet, gaping at Henwin in shock. That's impossible. It's not, said Gita, but Hugh wasn't listening. I can't believe what I am hearing here, said Hugh. My goodness, boy. He stared at Henwin. Have you actually gone mad? I'm not mad, Henwin insisted sharply, so loudly that Hugh fell silent with shock. Now listen to me, Henwin stood abruptly. Your son is safe, he declared at once, and I know where he is. He's with Pushyami and Laura and the caregoers. And you really expect me to believe that? You snapped with frustration. If what you're saying is the truth, that you knew were Pushyami and Lorna were this whole time, and you're saying you're not even my son. The rise in his voice caused Bartholomew to leap into the air with fright. Have you gone crackers? You began to pace almost restlessly. Why would you even say such a thing? Do you not realize you've been wasting our time? Henwin, for reasons unbeknownst to him, remained strangely silent. Why would you do this? Hugh shook his head angrily. This doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And it's true, he stopped. Why would you lie to us? He paused, his eyes misting as he turned downwards. Why would you lie to me? Please, Hugh. Angwin tried to reason with him. Try to understand, he pleaded. This was the only way. And he forced himself that. The only way I could spend time with the father I never knew, he whispered. And while that's a noble goal, said Hugh, you've gone and done it at the expense of others. Which is, by the way, something that my women would never do. Now, if you are who you say you are, then go ahead and prove it. Suddenly a burp was heard, and there, in the centre of the room, was a portal, and the portal was actually an opening, a doorway to the categories right before their very eyes. And Hugh stood, mystified, dumbfounded into silence, as Arthur did the same. Gita hung back slightly, as she wasn't ready to leave this place so easily. She felt at home here, and almost wanted to stay. Oh my good God, murmured Hugh. It's all real then. Hugh stared at the young man sitting across from him, whose features resembled every inch of his son perfectly. You're not him, but you look just like him. Slowly, almost hesitantly, he reached out a hand and gently traced Henwood's cheek in spite of himself. Henwood shivered. You look just like him, he murmured once again, echoing himself as though he couldn't believe his own words. This is remarkable. And you look just like my doll, who, tragically, had died before I was even born. Your father, whispered Hugh in shock, and your dimension. He died? Yes, nodded Hedwig, swallowing hard. Or sadly before I was born, and me ma, she raised me all on her own. Oh, my laddie. Hugh sighed as though with deep regret. He couldn't help himself then. He threw his arms around the other and drew him close. Oh, you baby, I'm so sorry I couldn't be there. It's okay, managed Denwin, though his voice was muffled against the other's chest. Oh, what could you do? You're a mere mortal, and it's quite like a challenge for mortals to be in two places at once. Not impossible, actually. He backtracked. Oh, you know what I mean. Oh, hush, laughed Hugh, who was smiling through his tears as he continued to hold the young man close, as though he would never have let him go. Pushyami had never seen a circus act before. There were bells and whistles like you've never seen, for since when had anyone seen a troupe perform with superheroes of all kinds, performing daredevil, frightening acts of courage right before their very eyes? I feel as if I'm living inside of some kind of dream, whispered Henry to Lorna, who appeared to be in some kind of a daze. I know what you mean, Lorna whispered, and without looking away as she could hardly take her eyes off the spectacle. They were absolutely fantastic. Henwin, whispered Pushyami, did Stitch perform like this for the cave people where you came before? Heavens, no, laughed Henwin, but a couple of times he did actually come quite close to it. Pushyami fell silent with awe as she watched them, though she could even only imagine from the cave drawings what those performances could have been. They watched with amazement as the group of acrobats before them did death-defying stunts that would have shaken any grown man. Even the super moles got involved, tumbling and twisting and flipping and flying through the air like a barrel of monkeys run amok. Fungus among us instigated electrical currents from his own bodies to cause ripples of light and colourful chemically induced explosions in mid-air. The supermoles jumped through his circles of purple and blue-coloured flames with the grace of a skydiving stuntsman, landing promptly on their feet as easily as it was breathing. Oh, they also juggled with the hovering, glowing metal balls that had curious symbols written all over them, and suddenly Henry realised why those options were so familiar. Miss P, whispered Henry, aren't those the same as the tower balls we saw at the Supernatural Conference in Glasgow? Why, yes, whispered Pushyami, back with amazement. I do believe they are. Nobody knows what they were used for, grinned Henry with a wink. Well, I guess we do now. Perhaps that's not even all. Pushyami watched the jugglers in awe. They seem to have their own special powers. Suddenly, a bright circle appeared in the center of the ring, a circle that appeared to glow brightly from within. Miss P, Hanwin gasped. What's that? Looks like a portal, whispered Pushyami, but that's absurd. At first they thought it was part of the show, but when the performers themselves stopped mid-act and stared, all the chaos fell to complete and utter silence. The observers knew there was something most highly unusual was occurring within their midst. And they were right. For out of the glowing circle, someone began to emerge, and Hanwin found himself looking at an exact carbon copy of himself, standing in the center of the ring, and there, standing right beside the mirror image of himself, was none other than his. Ah! Yelled Henwin, and jumped to his feet as though he ran into the center of the ring. Goodness me, it's really you. You're hearing. He paused. It's also. He stared with nearly speechless wonder at what might have been his own reflection. Me? You. Lorna threw his arms around the older man with relief. How is this possible? He managed to say in a breathless state. First you get here, he stared in amazement, and then the other henman. There are two of them? Before Hugh could respond, his loud voice boomed out. What is the meaning of all of this? Bear in mind was lumbering straight for Hugh, who turned with alarm at the sight of a real live bear coming straight for him. Henwin, he stuttered. Oh, ducking behind Henwin. That's a bear, he quaked, and he coming right towards us. I'm not just a bear, said the bear before Hugh could even get his bearings. I'm bearing in mind. And who are you exactly? He demanded crossly to interrupt our circus ceremony so unceremoniously. Circus? And Hugh glanced around with astonishment. We're in a circus. I thought this was a cave. Simple humans with simple minds, glowered Bear in Mind. You don't know the powers of the cave, do you? Excuse me, you gaped at the creature. I don't seem to know what you're talking about, and I don't know what you're talking about, and I don't even know what's going on. Neither do I, Duh, admitted Henry. Neither do I. Because you see, maybe you can explain why I'm standing in the same place, but I'm also in two separate places at once. You're another Hanwin, proclaimed Pushyami, stepping forward boldly out of the shadows. From another dimension, aren't you? Pushyami Gogireddi. The other Hanwin stepped forward and bowed towards her. Not surprisingly, you have guessed correctly, he said. I am in fact Hanwin from another dimension. What's more important, I'm not the only one from another dimension. So is she. She turned to introduce Gaeta, but Gaeta was suddenly nowhere to be seen. Gaeta, Hanwin called out into the shadowy crevices of the cave. Come forward now and do your duty. What is happening? Whispered Fungus among us. Who are these people? And why do so many of them look so much alike? They are alternate versions of the other, whispered Tempest to the teapot, and they have somehow unexpectedly come together once again. Pushyami held her breath as someone began to emerge from the shadows, and there, staring in front of her, was the very woman who had proclaimed to be her nurse back in Glasgow. The very same now, to Pushyami's astonishment, came forward and handed an object to her, and Pushyami gasped. Why, it's my ghost, big gotcha! She threw the device dear to her heart, not even noticing the tears flowing freely between her and down her cheeks. She stared at Gaeta. You knew it all along, she whispered with sudden knowing, didn't you? Gaeta couldn't respond. Her tears of regret answered for her, and suddenly old Pushyami could feel was sympathy. I see, she whispered. You loved him too. Instead of answering, Gaeta quietly began to sob. Instead of responding with words, Pushyami simply went to her and wrapped her arms around her in a gentle hug. Gaeta didn't resist the urge to return the gesture. She tightened her arms around Pushyami and hugged her close, as though they were long-lost sisters. And suddenly, Gaeta knew that's where she belonged. And suddenly, Gaeta felt that she was home. They continued without interruption for the rest of the performance, which went on into the evening. Hugh and Arthur were rendered speechless with childlike wonder. Henwin stood close to Lorna, suddenly wondering if the other Henwin had a secret agenda. He had just found his Lorna again, and he would not risk losing her to another dimension. I don't like this new me, he whispered on more than one occasion. He's got to be up to something. Hush, whispered Lorna. Just enjoy yourself for once. After the circuit was done, complete with colourful explosions of light and sound, they defied explanations, but made everything light up in the cave as though there was a second sun. They looked to a break for intermission, with Bear with us had planned a special gathering for their guests. A feast of the highest order was served, containing most of the savoury meats that Pushyami and her friends had ever tasted, and the juiciest berries, hand-picked from the vine, made for dessert, which had been used to make wine, which made you and Arthur was enjoying immensely. Who is responsible for this berry wine? Asked Hugh over the din. It's absolutely marvellous. That would be me, actually, sir, being the fungus among us. I specialise in wine making. Some might say that I'm really a master of horticulture. Well done, my leafy lad, well done. He beamed to you, who raised the glass in honour of his creator. Attention all. Stitch stood and tapped his glass, and all fell silent. We will commence with the circus ceremonies shortly, but first a toast to good friends. He grinned round the naturally formed granite-built table, both new and old. Here came the cheers and several rounds of huzzah. The sky had begun to dim, and soon the stars began to twinkle, and everyone was hushed with reverence, as without warning the northern lights made their presence known, as it began to spread like fire across the sky, and Pushyami shivered with glee. She could almost hear the whispers of her ancestors calling on her own. You have returned, dear sister, dear daughter. You have come back to us, for once again you are home. Pushyami Gogireddi, and hello, Earth. Pushyami woke from the most curious dream, with the memory of riding on a flying sea serpent. The creature transformed itself as she rode, flying hawk to golden eagle. The creature spoke to Pushyami not with words, but through her mind. I am the Nagadakashaka, and I will show you your true destiny. The flying serpent flew to her through the sky like a bird, then diving deeply down, swam through the looks like a salmon. All the while Pushyami could sense the eyes of cats all around her, watching from a great distance, their golden eyes shimmering unseen in the darkness. They flew over hills and narrow roadways, over tiny clusters of little white houses, some used, some forgotten. Pushyami felt herself transforming all the while, and when she found herself on solid ground once again, she looked down at herself and saw white hooves of a horse. Pushyami, a hand shaking her, woke her from her slumber. She looked up to see the concerned faces of Henwood and Lord Lagrange. Are you all right, Miss P? You look a bit peckish, noted Henwood with alarm. What a strange dream I've had, murmured Pushyami in a daze. I've never dreamt a dream like that before. Was it about yous? Inquired Henwood, or was it about a dozen yous? Because I said I had a dream about a dozen mays. He shivered in spite of himself, and believe me, it was terrifying. Oh, my love, lowering aside, I wouldn't mind if I had a dozen ewes for all the land. And she threw her arms around him as they swooned together, and they fell backwards into a heap, rolling around and giggling like school children until Pushyami crossed her arms and scowled. Okay, seriously, Edwin laughed. What did you dream? I believe, admitted Pushyami, that I was flying a gigantic sea serpent, and now hold on, said Hangman abruptly. Are you telling me you was riding a dragon that looked like a sea serpent? He was growing more excited by the minute. I think I know just what you're talking about, 'cause I saw it. So what? Asked both Lauren and Pushyami. A flying serpent, exclaimed Henry, back when we left Boney Bridge. Remember, we stopped at that lock? Well, I was staying behind to get a wee bit of fresh air. And when it went on, there came a humongous and terrifying looking creature that flew right out of the lock, right before my very eyes. It flew straight up into the air, and you could better be sure that it was looking like a dragon or a dinosaur. I wondered if it was a kelpie, much like the ones Ma told me about, what I was a bit of a wee lad. "Ah, a voice exclaimed from behind. You saw the aqua equus? Everyone turned to find Stitch in time sitting not far behind him, a huge grin spreading wide out across his face. This is the flying chariot, and the two others it anon. Flying chariot? Angwood shook his head. Aqua equus? What nonsense are you gabble going? Aqua equus is the ancient term for water horse. Stitch in time explained as he settled in, which is in fact the true identity of the so-called Loch Ness Monster, which is in fact not really a monster at all. So it's not a monster, wondered Lorna. What is it then? 'Tis a chariot of the gods, grinned Stitch in time. Known in mythological circles as the Tuatha De Danann, holy sacred people of Danu, who came from the land of Danu in the star system, not of this solar system or even of this galaxy. You're saying the Tuatha De Danann, or aliens, nodded Hugh, as he joined them, who came to this world from another star. He's right, my friends. And how would you know about that? Hanwin stared at his father now, as though he were a serpent with three heads. Are you secretly an alien as well? Course not, laughed Hugh. Then, no, I do have connections. Remember that club beneath the lighthouse of the Eye of the Man? But of course, smiled Pushyami. A place where you can get lost for 3 months when you think you've only been there for 3 days. Who could forget a place like that? Yes, grinned Hugh. Well, that club is at the same location as the secret entrance to the other world, and the passage which connects both the Isle of Man to the Cradle of Wales is in fact guarded by the one known as Manon MacLear, who is a member of the Tuatha De Danann, who are guardians of the earth as well as the other world. You mean all of these gods and goddesses and mythological figures are actually real? Real indeed, nodded Stitch in time. In this and many other dimensions. Well then, muttered Pushyami, I believe I'm going to need someone much stronger berry wine for this. Silly, Lorna giggled as she squeezed Pushyami's shoulder affectionately. Of course they're real. Don't you remember back in Dingle when they contacted the goddess? That was not your imagination when they spoke to her, and back to us in kind return. I do remember, nodded Pushyami quietly, and taking Lorna's hands on their own, they both recited. I am a part of all that is, and all that is a part of me. I belong in this world. I belong here as who I am. You might also remember, added Lorna, that we called upon the goddess Denu, which is the name for our Earth Mother, the Mother of Earth. I learned from studies abroad that this goddess who called upon will protect you from harm and your journey as you learn all truths about yourself and your deeper connections to the passages between land and sea. You might consider the sea of the earth cradled with the land in the centre of the mother's womb, the one from which all life begins and returns again, like Tiranoku. Lorna added with a smile as she gently squeezed Pushyami's hand, the eternal land of youth and beauty, which we all experienced as we journeyed through the tunnel from the Isle of Man to the mainland, noted Hugh. But what does the stream have to do with any of that? The great water horse does not just call upon anyone, proclaimed Stitch in time, and it seems as though it has called upon our friend here, the insatiable Miss Pushyami Gogireddi. 'Twas not only the serpent that made itself known. Pushyami was now aware that the rest of Bear with us was awake and listening to her with rapt attention. Perhaps one of you can tell me why there were cats in my dream. For my dream was not just one, but an entire kingdom of them. There was once, in fact, not in Stitch in time, in real life long ago. But were not actually cats. They were a Pictish clan, and what some might consider the indigenous people of Scotland. The earliest recorded name for Shetland is Insacat, meaning islands of the cat people, whose voice belonged to that of Goolsby, and when he spoke, Pushyami nearly squealed with joy. Goolsby, she imagined, laughing as she rubbed the ramship over her hand with triumph, twirling around. You've returned, finally, at long last. Oh, only one. This, Stitch pointed with amazement at the ramship, is your Goolsby? Looking rather puzzled as he peered most curiously at the ramship. Is it like a digital pet? No, laughed Pushyami. Gideon is not my pet. He's an independent spirit who can come and go as he pleases, quite conveniently, she explained. He has chosen to stick with me. His soul is safe inside the friendship for as long as his soul desires to stay. For how very wonderful indeed, the time-travelling man with the glowing jacket said, and quite particularly how extremely odd. Stitch continued to peer and ponder over their device as Pushyami grew wary of him and tucked it quickly and deep inside her pocket for safekeeping. The star map, Stitch said suddenly, leaping to his feet. I've got to show you all. The star map. And that concludes part 1 of this tale, and we're going to do the other video right after. So like and subscribe, tell your friends, and we'll always be glad for more fans for this wonderful art. We're glad and honored to share with you. And why not continue? Why not just continue? This was our intermission. This was our intermission, my friends. He raced to the very back of the cave, which separated into several caverns, the likes of which Pushyami had never seen, and one cavern which led to a hollow room. Within the walls betrayed the most magnificent mural any of them had ever seen. 'Twas filled with the most majestic and strangest of curious circles and spirals, twirls and dots and lines. Something about it looked strangely familiar, and Pushyami realized suddenly with a start she had seen something very similar, symbols on the Ogham stones back in Diggle, Ireland. Gideon, she whispered, what is this incredible mastery? To which Goolsby unexpectedly replied, the Cockna stone is a large cup and ring marked Cuppet, Auchnacraig, Fafley, West Derbyshire, Scotland, next to the Cockna farm. It is the Druid stone. The Bronze Age rock art is found on a stone measuring 42 by 28 feet, documented in 1887 by the Reverend James Harvey. It features 90 carved indentations, and it was considered to be one of the finest sets of petroglyphs in all of Scotland. Of course, exclaimed Stitch so suddenly that Pushyami had nearly lost her footing with alarm. The Cockna stone! I'd always thought it was a map. He ran from the room, only to return a piece of paper, to which Pushyami's surprise contained a picture of a stone, with several carvings and drawings. This must be it, he claimed. It's almost identical. We only got to add a few swirls and curlicues to the carvings, and blimey, Gustus, who knows what might happen? But, Pushyami stammered, I'm not an artist. But I am, exclaimed Lorna. Hangman, where's that piece of flint that's carved like a bear? They watched for about an hour or more as Lorna continued the mural with the eye of a master carver. They watched with amazement as she connected the dots, lines and swirls before they realized that she was done. The mural was complete. Lorna stood back with pride to observe her work. Oh, Lorna, murmured Pushyami with awe. I know, beamed Lorna. And something even more curious startled them into silence, for the symbols themselves that Lorna and the artists of old had drawn were beginning to glow, a brilliant shimmering greenish hue, and it filled the entire cave with light that filled their hearts with such warmth and love that Pushyami began to openly weep not with sadness and pain, but with joy. Miss P, exclaimed Henwin. Miss P, are you all right? Yes, murmured Henwin, and to Pushyami as Lorna and Henwin helped her to regain her balance. I do believe I am. She turned abruptly to Stitch. When is there a look nearby? She requested, because I do believe I must go there at once. He'd met her once so long ago it felt as if it was aeons. Pushyami Gogireddi, the name stirred something deep within his soul. He met her at a university in Dublin, back when he was a know-nothing, and knew nothing of the time travel or the multiverse, that it could even be possible. Then he fell into an odd sinking of interest with Professor David Eleanor, whose name, he said, was perhaps a pseudonym, and he began to obsess how to break the speed of light, the sound barrier, the fourth wall, and he took a course in David Delanour on artificial intelligence and advanced technology, and his life would never be the same. Though he kept his eyes on Pushyami Gogireddi, though she had no eyes for him. She was at the top of her class, already chosen to be valedictorian by the time he had created the exploratory, transportational, multi-dimensional device. And while he should have become famous for it, instead he dwindled away into obscurity, and she had long was forgotten about him. He, however, had not forgotten about her, and when Hoogstein of the 359th dimension would search for a way to find himself worthy of Pushyami Gogireddi's affection. Yet, however he travelled across dimensions, it seemed that none of the Pushyamis ever gave him the time of day, save for one particular version of Henwood's, the ninny, the so-called nitwit, who he felt himself to be an embarrassed version of. But Pushyami seemed to be more interested in Ninny than him. And once he knew about the Ugham stones, and one of the 359th dimension was intent on making sure that Ninny had won, and Pushyami of the 514th dimension weren't united for all of eternity. Yet the Chloricon thought differently. It was the University of Dublin where Edwin first laid eyes on Lorna. She was not particularly his cup of tea, though she seemed to be Edwin of the 454th, which baffled Edward of the 359th, until he realised Edwin of the 454th knew nothing about Pushyami Gogireddi, and he realised that the only way to encourage Edwin to play at the old smokehouse in Dingle, or he knew that Pushyami would follow her beloved Gideon Goolsby's instructions everywhere. What was it about Gideon Goolsby that everyone loved so? Wondered Edwin Hoogstein, who could travel between the dimensions, and he was lucky for even back and forward in time. He was a dapper, hard-working gentleman with a heart of gold. He always gave out equal affection and praise, and always expected equal affection in return. Yet Edwin couldn't help but to wonder to himself, why was he to be admired so much more than Edwin Hoogstein? He placed the menu of the old smokehouse in Edwin's mailbox, knowing that they were searching for local musicians to play, somehow knowing that everything would just line up just so when Pushyami arrived in Dingle. Yes, he had no idea that the Chloricon had other plans for Lorna. He wanted the Chloricon to make Lorna ignore Edwin, who was in the library making eyes at her, and she was to him. Yet the Chloricon was a pranking little creature who lived in the stacks of the Trinity Library, and he had his own agenda, as it seemed, to erase Lorna's memory of the moment where Henwin came and spoke to her, not only of him, but of her entire lineage, her own identity. Why Henwin couldn't say, only the Curicon liked to mess with people as they used the library for other means, such as making naughtiness amongst the stacks, which in his mind was absolutely forbidden. So, and Lorna returned to Dingle without a memory of Anwen Hoogstein, but also barely a memory of herself in Dingle. It was the damsel in distress that cemented Henwin's love for Lorna, and he completely forgot all about Pushyami. So it was now that Henwin and Lorna Lagrange were in love, and Pushyami Gogireddi was the love without the love of Henwin Hoogstein, and Henwin was alone, save for Geeta, who was still longing for her lost beloved Goolsby. Neither Henwin of the 359th nor Geeta could imagine whether they retired to Inverness from the Cairngorms they would encounter two men who would change their lives forever. The two sat in a pub overlooking the River Ness, across from St. Mary's Roman Catholic Church, and not far from Inverness Castle. "You're awfully quiet," remarked Geeta. "Sorry," Edwin shrugged. "Just a lot on my mind." "Are you regretting that we didn't stay?" asked Geeta. "Oh, why would we have stayed?" asked Edwin. "We would need it." Just then, out of nowhere, a large crash sounded outside, followed by a great commotion. And then when Geeta rushed to the window, where they were shown the most unusual sight, a man lying in the street. "Oh, goodness gracious!" cried Geeta as they ran outside. What happened? Oh, what have I done? The man wailed as he dropped to his knees. Gideon, wake up, Gideon. Henry? Geeta gasped at the sight of Henry Andre, who had been driving the car who had hit the pedestrian, who was a man he'd known before, a man he knew so well. Gator! Henry gasped. What have I done? Gooseby! Oh, Gooseby! And as he wept into the man's shirt, he's dead, he sobbed. I found him, and he's dead. Move aside. An AMT had suddenly appeared and stopped to take Goosby's vital signs. You know this man? She said. Yes, he's my friend. Henry was in a state that Keith had never seen before. He was not typically one to display emotion. Meanwhile, he was in shock, for there was his dead friend, still alive, and once again she had to pinch herself to remind herself she wasn't dreaming. Ouch! He's not dead, sir. The EMT reassured Henry. Let us attend to him. The police are here to ask you a few questions. I didn't mean to hit him, Henry protested and Gator ran to his aid. He's telling the truth, she declared to the police. He's a friend of Mr. Goolsby and he would never hurt him. We still have to ask you a few procedural questions, sir, the policeman said, and we have to check your blood alcohol level. I've not been drinking, proclaimed Henry, who was beside himself as Gideon was laid on a stretcher. I'm as sober as a pig in muck. Calm yourself, sir, the EMT urged. Miss, are you his friend? Gita nodded, looking for Henry, who was suddenly nowhere to be seen. 'Twas his way, however, to disappear without warning, as she was used to it. I am, she nodded. Yes. Will you accompany Mr. Henri to the hospital? We will be able to update you on Mr. Goolsby within the hour. All right, nodded Gator, though I wish I knew where my friend Henry went. Henry? Henry Henri looked almost amused. Of the Hoogstein hairpins? Oh, smiled Gator, momentarily distracted. You know of him? I love his music, Henry sighed as he waited for the cab to take him to the hospital. I wish I was listening to him right now, instead of the sound of that ambulance. He covered his ears as the ambulance began to wail even louder than he had before, and he took down the road to the hospital. Well, you're in luck, said Peter as he hopped into the cab, because he's my friend, and you'll probably be seeing him soon. But he doesn't know where we're going. He's got his ways, said Peter, smiling because she was soon to be with her Goolsby, and somehow she knew that everything was going to be okay. And they arrived at the hospital where they were told to wait in the lobby. Gator took to the chapel to say a prayer for Gideon's recovery. She wasn't surprised to see Hangman there waiting for her. Is he all right? Asked Hangman. They say he's got a concussion, said Geeta, and sat down and shook. But she'll be fine. He's just woken up. Then why aren't you there with him? Asked Hangman. Because, Geeta murmured, bowing her head with great sadness. He won't remember me. She shook her head. He must be from another dimension. But how? Why is he here? Why is he alive? Curious, said Edwin. There must have been a rift in space-time. Do you think he's destined to find Pushyami then? Geeta lowered her head with defeat. Should I even go and say hello? Geeta, Edwin held her hand in his. How did you say you met Gideon in the past? He saw me as equal, a trusted partner. Gator broke down and wept to Henry's arms. He never saw me as romantic, but I was hoping, she wept, hoping. You're beautiful, Gator, and Henry held her close and whispered in her ear. And to be truthful, I think you're even more beautiful than her. He wasn't expecting the words to come so soon, or so clearly. He hadn't even known that he'd been thinking that himself. You're as handsome as can be. Aunt Gaeta kissed him on the cheek, and it tingled, warmth spreading through his soul, settling deep within Henwin's heart, and suddenly he was kissing her all over, and she returned his affections with unequivocal desire. They knew they might be judged by God for kissing in a chapel, but neither of them could help it, and one couldn't let his fear of sin stop him, and they continued to kiss with wild abandon until they were satisfied and lay down between the pews. "Oh, I love you, Gator Gamber," whispered Edward. "And I you, my dearest sweet," said Gator. Hand in hand, they returned to the lobby, where Henri appeared to be waiting for him. "He is awake!" exclaimed Henri. "He doesn't even remember what happened. I think the police are going to forgive me." He stopped and he gazed at Gator. What should I say to him? "Be good to him," said Gator, "and he will be good to you." "I will," said Henry, "for all my days and always for all of time." He stopped at the sight of someone entering the lobby with snacks aplenty in both hands. Mr. Oogstein, Henry had noticed him and strode towards him with his hand extended. "I'm a huge fan of your music, young man." "Ah!" Edwin held out a snack and offering as he pumped the other hand energetically. "So you're the one." The look was thankfully not far away. Stitch volunteered to lead him. They said their most grateful and fearful goodbyes to bear with us with the promise of a faithful return. As much as everyone longed so much to stay, they knew they were now on their grand submissions. Fungus among us bowed towards him, and the super moles clambered about for a few last-minute belly rubs. Tempest could be seen wiping a glistening tear from his eye, as under the weather waves goodbye to the group. "Adieu, adieu," she hides as they, under the weather, locked their hands tight to the most legendary of trios. "Adieu," called back Pushyami to the most legendary meteorologist and fungi known to land. They arrived at the look. It was seemed like a blink of an eye, as though they arrived in a large body of water. There was no water horse to be seen. I was certain that he would be here. Pushyami's shoulders sank with disappointment. "He will come," declared Stitch, "but first you must give him an offering, and it has to be one from the land." Without delay they went about gathering nuts and berries. Hugh, a master whittler, carved the creature a small statue of a bear. Pushyami took a stone from her pocket. 'Twas not the stone of destiny that she'd been given when she was a kid. It was a green stone her father had called serpentine. They placed these along the shore of the loch, and when all was said and done, they waited with bated breath for the creature of the hour to arrive. And suddenly, as though a spell had been cast, the sky had begun to darken, the water began to bubble and churn, and before their very eyes, a giant living cauldron, a fire-breathing creature far bigger than any of them could imagine, complete with long neck, flippers and tail, emerged from the deep, shot out of the water at a warp-rapid speed. It flew upwards, just as Henwood had described, straight up into the clouds, came spiraling back down again, only this time it did not disappear back under the water, coming to a rest as it remained partially submerged beneath the water's surface. The creature laid its long neck upon the shore, beckoning them to come forward in greeting. "It's," Henwood sputtered, "it's actually a dragon." "No," laughed Lorna, "he's a live flying ship of the two water they did know. But stammered Edwin, "Tell me, Lorna, do ships have eyes?" And he pointed at the creature's eyes, these large, endlessly all-seeing windows of the soul. "Oh, not a dragon, nor a ship," and the voice suddenly spoke as though coming from the sky. Perhaps I could see you both, or perhaps neither. You see that I am here, though I'm also nowhere. I'm also everywhere all at once. I am the one who weaves your dreams into the everyday corridors of your waking life. I am the harbinger of sanctuary, and your promise for a new tomorrow. Your pool of destiny reflecting upon your truest self. What kind of rambunctiously endless riddles are these? Exclaimed an indignant Edwin, who, even as a bard, had never heard such poetry before in his life. I am the next most distant star beyond your galaxy, the voice continued on. I am the very most distant galaxy beyond your own very star. Before one of them could respond, a great rumbling shook the earth, and all of them nearly lost their footing as a great door began to appear. A doorway, which Pushyami could only describe as a portal, had actually led inside the creature's ear. To seek thy purest form, the creature concluded. You must face thy purest self, past, present, and future. Come aboard, and I will lead the way to your purest reflection of self. And when shivered, go inside the ear of a gigantic sea serpent. He shook himself, though out of delirium. I must be dreaming now for sure. Come now, my boy, cried Hugh, as he and the others ran towards the portal that beckoned perhaps towards eternity. Tis the opportunity of a lifetime. And when turned to find Stitch in Time standing before him with hand extended, he shook it, suddenly feeling misty-eyed. And will you perhaps be coming with us? As much as I would love to go, sighed Stitch in Time, 'tis not my place to be aboard an interdimensional spaceship such as this, for my temporal charge would go haywire, so I'm afraid I must leave thee to thy own devices, though I know we will meet again some day, and do not fret, my son, thy devices are good, faithful, and true, and when embraced a true brother in arms, for as an only child he had never known before. The three nuns bowed at Stitch in Time. Blessed be, Sister Blythe, Prudence said, and blew them a kiss as they departed. Blessed be, and Sister Cordelia Constance, blessed be, and Sister Primrose Patience, all at once they boarded the ship of dreams. Never before would Pushyami have dreamt she'd been in the belly of a dragon, or was it the flying ship of destiny? And yet here she was, and it was like it nothing she had never imagined. She was surrounded by darkness, with the sounds of the working organs expanding and contracting all around, and suddenly they were nearly blinded by a sudden burst of light. A holographic image began to appear, a huge screen as it was, and Pushyami and her friends gathered together in awe. The screen began to project moving images, and suddenly they were sitting what appeared to be theatre chairs. What kind of bloody creature is this? Cried out Henwin, nearly stumbling to his doom as the chair came up from under him. They watched in awed amusement as the screen began to tell a story that Pushyami knew all too well, her own. It was a real play of her life, all the way from birth to grade school and into college, and they watched as Pushyami took the position from Goolsby and Henry and began to study engineering with the plans perhaps of a future career. For Pushyami had plans to help change the world. She had always wanted to make a difference, and her father had long ago taught her that a well-educated mind was filled with fruitful possibility. She saw her father's death, the one who had raised her from a babe to cancer. She saw his pride as she told him of her plans to create the device that would eventually become the Goolsby Gotcha. She saw herself staring at Goolsby slumped over his desk before the main frame, and she saw herself weeping. And even curiouser than this was the holographic display of her entire life was the moment of the display began to rewind, and suddenly, instead of working for Goolsby, she had chose to go to engineering school, and so she'd never got to know the man she'd come to admire and love for so long. She'd never since known Goolsby, never Dingle, nor of Henwin, or Lorna, or the three nuns. and then as though to remind her that she would never have met the others, the display suddenly fast forwarded into the future, where there had been no town computer, no three epiphanies sent back by Pushyami, for she had never met Henwin, or Lorna, or Hugh, or Arthur, and thus had never went on her adventures which had inspired these three epiphanies to begin with. And we're going to go to the next. Just confirming that. Oh, yeah, baby. There's a fourth part, and this is it. If you like this, tell your friends, share with your friends, like and subscribe. And this future wasn't what she would have expected. It seemed without the three epiphanies, the world had turned dark and grey and was full of strife and endless misery. The earth was on its final frontier, barely turning. There were no numbers of wars that never seemed to end. And then Pushyami watched the display rewind again, back further to where she had chosen to meet Goolsby, and saw her through to the present moment, from Cologne, Germany to Dingle and Dublin, all the way back through the UK, and where she was now, in the belly of a giant sea creature, watching her life unfold before her, depending upon the choices she had chosen to make. And then the images sped forward towards them into the future once again, and Pushyami watched herself lecturing in front of a group of students. They were the female students from her dream, each one from a different country, all with different powers of abilities of their own, and here she, yes, was her one of the largest battles she had ever seen. Once the battle was over and justice had been won, the world was never the same, only better, and peace would reign over the land once again. And then the video stopped and a doorway appeared again. There on the other side, the entrance to the kingdom of the cats, the Shetlands, where Pushyami knew, almost for certain, she was about to meet the two authoritative known. What a ride! Exclaimed Hugh, wiping his brow. What did I just experience? Angwin was stumbling around in a daze. Pushyami meanwhile turned and kissed the serpent on its cheek. The creature bowed once before slipping quietly back into the look, where the water churned slightly and disappeared. Oh, where are we? Lorna turned around. It seems as if we're in the middle of nowhere. Almost, laughed Hugh. This bay was known as the Gobber of Wick. What on earth is this Wick business? Demanded Hangman. And what's that meant when something's green and lively like a shrub that hasn't died? Quite, nodded Hugh, though it can also reference a dwelling place, and in this case, it's the dwelling of Gobera. And what in the name is a Gobera? Hangman was growing frustrated. She is a woman who lives in this area, Henry, sighed Hugh, and she was significant enough that the village was named after her. She is now part of the Orkneying saga of Norse folklore. Now stop interrogating me, 'tis all I know. How could you say that, Lord Edwin? You're Norse by nature. Of course, laughed Hugh, and so are you. More Irish than Norse, scowled Henwin. County Kerry, through and through. You're not even from County Kerry, lad. Let's head up to the old church, intercepted Pushyami before things get out of hand, and figure out where to go from there. Sounds like a plan, noted Henwin, in agreement. What do people around here eat anyway? I'm famished. They followed a short stream up from the shores of the bay side. There on the little hill inlet was the tiny stone church. They waited and sat on the wall and stared out at the bay, watching several different birds flying around in a circle. What a glorious vista, Sister Bride breathed in the salty sea air. I could sit here and stare out at this ocean forever. Isn't it Incredible, remarks Sister Primrose, that no matter where you are, there's usually a place for sanctuary. And it's not always in church, agreed Arthur Osborne. But when it is, I'm not complaining. Sometimes it's a cave, grinned Edwin. And sometimes it's a glen, added Lorna. And sometimes, giggled Edwin, it's you. Lorna blushed, but before she could respond, he planted the most romantic and passionate kiss on her lips as he embraced her with all of his might, leaving the swooning and yearning for more. And the others giggled with amusement at the scene as the two continued to embrace each other with the desire of long-lost lovers. This has been quite the adventure, hasn't it, Pushyami sighed. And it's not done yet. A voice nobody recognized startled them out of their reverie. They almost heard at once to find an older, almost squirrely gentleman gentleman in an old tweed suit and a strange-looking hat, appearing as though out of nowhere. You must be the woman of prophecy, he nodded in Pushyami. We've been waiting. Woman of prophecy, one Pushyami repeated with astonishment as the others stood at once. Are you speaking to me? Indeed I am, with pride, the stranger, for you are the woman who has been foretold for centuries will come to this land from afar. Forgive me, Pushyami nodded respectfully, but I have never met you before. Gareth, bowed the gentleman in strange dress, the governor of Gomerwick. Since my fall, I haven't been the same. Since my fall, I haven't been the same man. Oh. Goblin, and when gulped and hid behind Lorna, who giggled. He's just an old man, she shook her head with annoyance. Oh, said Gareth, but I am much more than that, for I am the God who will take you to the kingdom of Dagda, the hold of the gods. You mean the Tuatha De Danann, explained Pushyami. How do you know where they are? As I said Gareth, I am the guide. One or two, in fact, he added, for the other guardian is the Phantom of Fladabista. Phantom? Hanwin hid further behind Lorna. Oh, for goodness sake, said Lorna. He's not really a phantom, is he? She asked of Gareth, the governor of Gomerwick. It is purists. No, dear, said Gareth, with a sudden shift in tone, appearing sad, though I'm afraid he's been there on this island by himself for so long that others have begun to think of him as a phantom, and I've been entrusted with the guardianship of this hillside just as he, and we are on either side of the hill, and we're entrusted with delivering the two author's guests safe and sound. Would work together, asked Edward. You both have the same responsibilities. The Phantom and I do cross paths on occasion, smiled Gareth, and when we do, it's been grand. The Phantom, though I prefer to call him Flatty by short, is quite shy, you see. He's a tad bit difficult to get him into hiding. So what are we supposed to find him, Lorna asked, if he doesn't want to see anybody? I will show you how to get there, said Gareth, and I will provide transportation. Transportation? Pushyami was about to wonder what they meant by that, when suddenly, to her right, 8 white horses did appear. Oh, she gasped, they're absolutely beautiful. They are indeed, noted Gareth, and they shall serve you well, for they are incredibly fast. One thing you should keep an eye out for in Flatabister, he added, is the Shetland sheepdog. They too know where to lead you, and they'll take you to the hole of destiny. But first, said Gareth, I would locate the Phantom of Flatabister, because he knows the leader of the pack personally, and they will show you the way and how to get inside. Bless you, beamed all 3 sisters, and Arthur and Hugh helped them onto their horses. How can we ever repay you for your kindness? Pushyami bowed towards the Goblin of Gomerwick. You already have, smiled Gareth, returning the bow with great affection, for you treat me as an equal, and I thank you for it. But you could listen to my song again, as I prepared to get a little better mentally this time. In my pool, I haven't been the same, mate. Oh, my pool, I haven't been the same, mate. Oh. From one outsider to another, Pushyami noted, "I value thee." She proceeded to give the old man a hug, and he blushed profusely. So grateful was he that her kindness and generosity. They got on their respective horses, who began to gallop at incredible speed. They sped through the countryside with the ocean in their left and sparse landscape to their right, peppered here and there with only a few houses. The horses pulled to a final stop at a gathering of ruins sat overlooking the water. "This can't be it," whispered Henry with amazement. "Can it?" "What else is around?" whispered Lorna. "Unless we go knocking on the homes of people we don't know." One of the horses let out a loud "Yee!" Walked a few times as though it were unsettled. Suddenly, a louder swirl of the wind began to pick up, and then out of the settlements appeared a misting figure in a druid-like cloak. "Who comes, bearing the presence of the great steed?" The figure approached them, slowly yet purposefully. "'Tis I," bowed Pushyami as she dismantled herself from the horse. The, the Lord appreciated. "What would a prophecy?" "Prove it," demanded the phantom of Flattabista. "Hey now, and when shocked. No easy, no reason to get all tasty. As I understand you were in your time. And who are you?" growled the phantom. "And what business have you here?" "We have been told to find you from Gareth of the Bay," intoned Sister Blythe. "We mean you no harm, only to wish to locate the Hall of Destiny. You are seeking the hillside to Watha," acknowledged the Phantom of Flanabister, "and yet I see no reason to believe you are worthy of such connections." "Perhaps this will." Buscemi revealed the amulet given to her by King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. The shimmering stone glowed, and the phantom immediately lowered his head in reverence and understanding. "Daughter of Dinon," he kneeled before, "sister of the Brotherhood, I will give you the key and the name of a four-legged beast that will take you the rest of the way." "Bless you, kind sir." Pushyami bowed and returned towards him. "And for you a gift." She placed a piece of quartz inside his hand. It was clear, but it seemed to glow with a greenish hue. "Thank ye," noted the phantom. "I will not forget your arrival and kindness of your presence on this most sacred of days." He gave a whistle, and a majestic show dog appeared. "The kind of sheepdog is the leader of the dog tribe," said Edwin. "You may refer to him as Vonnie, a nickname for Von, which is helping old Norris." "Hello, sweet Vonnie." Lorna gave an affectionate pat on the dog, snuggling her, parting and panting eagerly for more. So then Pushyami climbed back into her house. "It is time. Let us depart." Vaughan left them from a coastline to the village called Kwarf, a rural portage. It was a coastal port village, just as sparse as the rest of them. The countryside was beautiful and dotted with white houses. They were led to one of the largest hills the Pushyami had ever seen. It was like a huge plateau, and the hillside was covered with sheep, which when Vonnie approached, they scattered to the four winds and appeared at once into the mist. Von marked rice, and the ground began to quake, yet there would only been hillside there. Now there made an opening like a tunnel in the side of the hill itself, beckoning them forward. "Do you think it's safe?" whispered Henry as they peered into the tunnel. As though on cue, there came a loud booming voice, although also feminine and soothing, from inside the hill. "Do not be afraid, dear children of Danu." The voice spoke. "We are the Shining Ones who have been awaiting your arrival. Please come forward, as your presence is granted." Poor Shammy felt a strange warmth filling her chest just as she and the others entered the cavern, which illuminated their path with an eerie greenish glow, and inside, greeting them on either side of either wall, were carvings of ancient symbols, almost like none of them had ever been seen before, except perhaps the ancient picture symbols they had witnessed back in the caregivers. And so too were these symbols glowing. However, they were glowing blue instead of green, and the entire cave was glowing a greenish hue. It sent shivers down Pushyami's spine as they continued on the path, as brilliant, flickering, shimmering torches guided them onward towards their door journey. And all the while music could be heard, mystical, musical, magical, pipes and harps and flutes were resounding with the echoes of ages passed throughout the cavern home. Pushyami had to stop a moment as the end of the passageway was coming near, leaning towards what appeared to be an opening of the outside yet again. And yet somehow she knew it couldn't be. No, this was an opening inside the hill itself, which was actually a hollow-nation cave of the most wondrous delights. For when she and the others emerged into the night, there stood the most impressive tree they had ever seen. It towered above them, taller and more magnificent even than the most tallest and gigantic old redwoods, and Pushyami immediately recognized this as a gigantic yew tree, like the Norse called Yggdrasil, the tree from which all life begins. Upon its branches bearing fruit and golden leaves and dew, 4 stags stood, reaping its bounty. A squirrel darted to and fro, chittering as though it relayed messages from the hawk above, as it perched above the eyes of the eagle. Though the tree was so tall, no one could see that this oak was the one providing the messages, for the branches seemed to stretch forever and up into a misty underground sky, and the roots dove deep into the earth, where deep beneath them the serpent swam. All around the base, the flowers were blossoming and always in bloom, for this tree was never bare, always bore the fruit of its labours. Surrounding the tree, there were several standing stones, all in a circle, 9 to be exact, each representing the 9 worlds. When touched by hand, the entrance would appear. As Pushyami and the others approached, unnerved by the almost overwhelming sight and smell all around them, a humongous black crow swooped in from overhead, crowning thrice. As it circled them, Pushyami shivered and moved onward through the jungle that had been long since grown wild at the base of the tree and extended outward to the further far reaches of beyond. And suddenly a path appeared, a long green carpet of grass appearing magically before them, and before them stood an opening to a clearing where appeared before them a large stone temple which reminded Pushyami of those she had read about and many ancient civilizations. Inside, many figures sat. At first only could be seen in shadow, until one began to step forward, emerging with a shining light, like a halo before them, and Pushyami, weak-kneed, dropped to the ground in humble reverence of the one who stood before her, whose heroic voice could not be heard with words, but with their minds. Dear heart, do not be afraid, for I am the goddess Danu, the Earth Mother, keeper of the earth, and giver of life, and mother of all. 'Tis I who have been calling your presence for aeons, for at long last received you here among the elders, the gods and the goddesses who have been watching you and watching over you for 1,000 lifetimes. Please, dear heart, do not be afraid. Welcome. You are home. Pushyami could not stand. She bowed before the goddess, the greatest mother and mother of all, and only when she could breathe again did she ask the question she had been wondering all the while. Why, she whispered, did you choose me? You are the prophetess from which the keys of destiny are foretold, said Daniel. You hold the secret of the sanctuary of the motherland and all who reside with it, above and below. Lifetimes have foreseen, many seasons of yourself. In one lifetime you resided in Iru, and in that lifetime you were a great seer and visionary, foretelling the future and the ancient prophecies. Another time You were the record keeper, a monk who strove to preserve throughout the ages, and yet another lifetime you were a travelling gypsy who journeyed through between worlds from Ireland to India, and there you became Pushyami, and for whom we shall always hold you sacred in our hearts, for you are holding the keys to the kingdom in your hands, the keys to the kingdom of glory and salvation, which humanity means preserving, the heart of all earth, the mother of us all, the one who feeds us and gives us life from the very centre of creation. Wait, mother! Pushyami dared not kiss the shining one, though she was tempted. I had had visions of myself a leader of proteges who will follow me to a summer land and beyond. You will lead them all in battle and glory and honour. But goddess Danu spoke with great affection. You will teach them all who need to know to keep the shadowy ones at bay. Pushyami shivered a little at the thought of it all. Pacifist by nature, she was not certain she could see herself running into any sort of battle. She yearned for the assistance of the nuns or Lorna's arm, even though they were standing back to provide space and honoring the great significance of the most humbling and sacred moment taking place before them. For I'm sure not sure. I'm ready, she admitted, her voice faltering. Oh, dear, sweet love. The goddess hovered over her with her clear dress flowing like mist. We, the Dagda, will ensure every step of the way. And she bent forth and kissed Pushyami on the crown of the head. We have called you here to acknowledge your victories, for you have achieved greatness, more so than many before you have done. You are the one to be honoured by our pantheon and the grandest feast of all the land. Come, my love, and join us in song and dance, for this is a celebration of you and all of you who have journeyed before us in our land of sweet oak and honey. And so, before further ado, the ceremonies commenced. The Dagda himself, the gods and goddesses of the new, appeared before them in succession to fill the spaces around a great grand oak table, and Pushyami could hardly believe her eyes, for here was the whole field, with the gigantic warriors, an entire panel filled with gods and goddesses, the legendary princes and princesses of the too often dated non, sitting before her, welcoming her into their sacred space with open arms. There was Lou, the all-seeing god of light, glowing as bright as the sun with his mighty sword and shield placed down before him. There beside him was Odin, the one-eyed guardian of Valhalla, who shook you and Henwin's hand with much delight. There beside him was Bridget, daughter of Danu and goddess of art and prophecy, who embraced them as their long-lost brothers and sisters. There were others still, and at the very end of the table they saw to their delight one very familiar face. Merlin! Exclaimed Pushyami as she threw her arms around him. I can't believe it's actually you. But of course it's me, dearie, giggled the ever elusive Merlin. And it's you. Why, I wouldn't have missed this moment for all the world and the worlds of every universe, past, present, or future. Bless you, my sweet darling. And he hugged her tight. Welcome home. They were welcomed into the seats. The cauldron of fire owned by the Dagda, the father of gods himself, was brought out to provide them with all the food and drink they could ever want. And so 'tis came the time. They all gathered to dance around the maypole and sang a dance, and they had the most charming and magical music they had ever heard before in their waking life or even in their dreams. And this was, of course, due to the fact that the music was played by the fairies, who were accompanying them on their journeys all the while, hiding in the mounds of Tara and watching from afar, way high up in the trees. And once the music was done, and when chose his moment, he stepped down before Lorna Lagrange and said, Miss Lorna, Heavenly Lorna Lagrange, you are my soulmate, my truth, my heart, my everything. Would you so kindly accept my humblest offer? And he kneeled and took her hand to be with me as my one true love for all of eternity, as my forever bride. And now, until the end of time? Oh, Hedwin, gushed Lorna Lagrange. Why, of course. Yes, 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 and 1,000 times yes. I will be thine forever and ever and ever until the end of time. The two embraced with lips entwined. The entire crowd let out a sheer of joy beyond any mortal had been experiencing, and the tree seemed to shake its branches with approval and to glow ever brighter in their connection of happiness as the cup ran it over, and their celebration continued, seeming to last forever and a day, or perhaps for all time. It didn't matter, because what mattered most was that each of them had had each other, and what each of them had had for each other was love. Love brought them there, and love kept them there. Pushyami Gogireddi and the progression of souls. Heinwin had never thought he'd be travelling by ferry again. But this time he was with his one true love, and nothing was going to stop them from reaching his homeland once again. Theirs was a most romantic time crossing the Bergen, the gateway of the fjords in Norway, for it was Norway was Henry was from, and he wanted nothing more than to have Lauren Lagrange introduced to his dear mum Helga, who Henry could not help but remember he hadn't seen her husband Hugh Hilstein in years. He tried not to think about that aspect at all, as he and Laura strode decks in the brilliant sunlight. Dear Hanwin, Lorna brimmed with pride. You finally seem to have grown your sea legs. I have, haven't I? Beamed Hanwin, pleased with himself. Perhaps was all that travelling I've been doing, jumping back and forth between time. He and Lorna shared their own cabin on board the ship. They spoke of what they wished to do for their wedding, exciting about the planning of it all. Will your dog come? Asked Henwood excitedly. I'd not got the chance to properly meet him. He doesn't like to travel much, said Lorna, but I think he'll come to Norway for this. And she cemented the decision with a beloved's kiss. They arrived in Bergen finally after a 3-day journey across the North Sea. The nuns, who had not done so much travelling in some time before setting off from Pushyami, they were all relieved to be back on land. They spent some time in Bergen seeing the sights, and they took the E16 out of Bergen, heading through the World Heritage Park, where they stopped to admire the narrowest fjord in all of Norway, where they had continued on following the E16 for several hours, eventually stopping to take the sights at the Valdres Folk Heritage Museum and Fangerness and the Valdres region, and took in some trout fishing and enjoyed a drink or two. From there they continued on to Oslo, and they took in the views of the Oslo fjord, enjoying the delicious seafood. Content to spend the night, they explored the extensive Viking history of Norway through their very own Viking museum. No wonder sometimes I feel like a to the horn, giggled Edwin. They posed with some of the most unusual looking human sculptures at the Vingerland Park. Don't go blowing any horns and waking them up, Edwin, you roared warningly. The next day a boat ride through the Akershus fortress, a beautiful medieval fortress, and went on an impressive tour, but they also took a tour of the capital's impressive royal palace. The acoustics in this place are incredible, remarked Henry, and by the waterfront they enjoyed a performance or two at the Oslo Opera House and visited the Munch Museum. This place sure gives you the munchies, giggled Henry as he stuffed his face during intermission. The nuns meanwhile enjoyed the Catholic choir at the historic and architecturally impressive Oslo Cathedral until they were moved again to tears. From Oslo the following day, it was a bit over a 3 hours drive to Gothenburg, Sweden, where they stopped and visited the Gothenburg Museum of Natural History and the City Museum. They also stopped to observe the expressive Skansen Kronar fortress there. From Gothenburg, they finally entered Denmark, where they stopped at Malmö, Sweden, the country's biggest city, where they took some time at the city square's Lower Torg, complete with quite cobblestone. And from there they took the Øresund Bridge to Copenhagen, where they enjoyed a ride down the canal and admired the unusually striking colours of the red and yellow, brown and blue houses. It's like blue strange box of chiclets, joked Edwin. Right, laughed Edwin. Now where's the hungry giant that's meant to eat them all? In Copenhagen, they delighted in the wooden roller coaster rides at Tivoli Gardens and explored the life of Hans Christian Andersen, who was born there. Hans, exclaimed Hugh, don't you think maybe he was really a hedgehog, do you? He thought as he spent the rest of the day visiting the Museum of Natural History and the Natural Museum of Denmark. After spending the night, they took their stock at Morrison and enjoyed their rides to their heart's content at Bucket Amusement Park. Even the nuns got brave and took a jaunt on the roller coaster. They continued on E20 West, admiring the impressive Egeskov Castle as well as H.G. Andersen's House Museum. Edwin was moved to tears. From there, they took in Epcot Amusement Centre and Coldicus Castle. They took the E20 down to E45, all the way through Hamburg, Germany. Anyway, just take the 7 down, and you get to see Rendsburg to your west. Passing New Munster on the east, they continued their journey down the 7th, marvelling at how enormous it was. Perhaps that's called why it's called New Munster, quipped Edwin. And they took 7 straight down to Hamburg, catching their amusing at Elfim Harmonie, visiting Miniature Wonderland and Planten and Blumenstadt Park. After the night, they visited Hamburger Kunsthalle Museum and the Museum of Anthropology and the International Maritime Museum before heading back to Bremen. While staying the night in Bremen, they visited all the museums, including the Huntschool book, which they said was the Universum Bremen Science Museum, which they found all very impressive. Then they bid their leave to Germany as they headed west on the 28th, passing down Mannhorst to the north. Continuing on the 28th, they stop at Landstrom Nature and Humankind in Oldenburg, and the Schloss Oldenburg Museum and Oldenburg Computer Museum on the way, continuing westward to the west on the 28th. While at Leer, they couldn't help but stop at Castle Everberg Centre for horticulture before retiring with a couple of drinks of the best wine that region had to offer. They were now at the border of Netherlands and Deutschland, where they began their journey at the A7, taking them to their ancestral homeland. Along the A7, they passed Hugebrug to the south, to which Henry quipped, sounds like I'm going to seem every mention of every city has something to do with some Hug. And of course, they mentioned Hugezan, stopping briefly to admire the National Bus Museum. Too bad they haven't seen the Henny Penny and the Greatest Show. In Groningen, they took a breather as they visited the Groningen Museum and Northern Maritime Museum. All the time Henwin sang, when I was in Groningen, and they then they continued out of the city on the A7, where they found Hoogkerk to their north. Continuing out of the city on the A7, they see Hoogkerk to their north, prompting another joke about the house from Henry. They stopped briefly at Drachten to see a show at the Theatre de Loire, and they drove through the old Fanayan National Park. Continuing on the A7, they passed Herenveen on their south and Jure to the east. They continue on the A7 out of the city, past Bullsworth to their north and distinctive imposing Afsluitdijk Bridge, and explored the local Afsluitdijk Wadden Center Technology Museum, where they poured over everything with a fine-tooth comb, finding it to be quite wondrous. They stopped additionally at the Casamat Museum and crossed the Afsluitdijk. Goodness gracious, what an undertaking, remarked a weathered Hugh, and he was a seasoned diver too. They continued on the south towards the A7 and the heart of the nation, stopping briefly at Zwaag to their east, where they enjoyed the Museum Hoorn, Menenblik, the West Fries Museum, the Museum of 20th Century, and enjoying a show at Municipal Theatre Park. Finally continuing south on the A7 and passing Purmerend on their east, they entered downtown Amsterdam, and Henwin and Hugh Hosting were finally home. Oh, they were finally home after such a journey which continued, and Here they were after admiring the architecture and the canals. They went straight to the Zud district where Henwin's mother had lived, not far from Beatrix Park. The doorman immediately recognized Hugh and let him in. They rode to the fifth floor where Henwin's mother lived. "You look," said Hugh as he looked quite suddenly nervous. "No, no, you," said Henwin, who looked equally nervous. "No, you, son," said Hugh as he positioned Henwin in front of the door. "No, you." "Okay," they said once together. "We'll both knock." And knock they did. "Do my eyes deceive me?" The large, rosy woman on the other side of the door stood back aghast. "You Hoosting, is that you? Back from the dead, are you now?" Hugh and Henwin said nothing, and they tried hard not to chuckle, for they had been to dead already not long ago. "Yes, Helga, my love," said Hugh. "'Tis I, returned to you once again," and he held his arms open wide, but Helga had seen Henwin. "Sonny!" Helga burst forth, nearly knocking Hugh over in the hallway as she embraced Henwin, nearly knocking him over in the process. "Where have you been?" "I told you, Ma," Henwin managed to protest through a clumpful of his mother's hair. "I've been studying and journeying." "And who is this all you've got with you?" Helga seemed more impressed with the two ladies than Hugh and Arthur and the three nuns. "An entire pantheon of pilgrims you have now." "'Tis true," beamed Henwin, "and me lady love Lorna, who, by the way," he added, "I have asked to be my bride." "Oh, darling!" Helga was overjoyed and quickly embraced Lorna, who was a bit blindsided by it all. "Welcome to my family, my dear," grinned Henwin and Helga, and they brimmed over with pride. "And who are you?" she asked the nuns. "I've never known you to be the religious kind," she added, with a suspiciously narrowed look at Hugh, who blushed and looked awkwardly away. "They're our friends," grinned Henwin. "His sister Blythe, the house mother, and sister Cordelia and sister Primrose have been invaluable additions to our journey." "'Tis been an honour to accompany your son on his travels," bowed Sister Blythe towards Helga, who could only stare back in astonishment and wonder. "Where have you been?" She tapped Hugh playfully on the shoulder. "And where have you taken him that he's my this lot?" She gasped suddenly as she saw Pushyami, and I know her face. She exclaimed, Helga excitedly, because she'd been around all over the news. She bowed her head respectfully towards Pushyami. "I am honoured to be in my presence, my love, for you are the legendary hero of our day." "Thank you," stammered Pushyami, "but oh, this has happened so fast, and I didn't mean for any of it to happen at all." "Well, that's the best way of having an adventure," grinned Edward. "You don't plan, you just go with your intuition." "Who are you?" laughed Helga, "and what have you done with my son?" They immediately began planning the wedding, which was to be held in a nearby sprawling green bungalow park on the banks of a beautiful pond. As a wedding gift, the three nuns both gave Hagrid and Lorna the quilt they had been belovedly knitting since Edinburgh, detailing the entire length of their journey. There was a square that depicted the ceremony of Dingle, and another in the Trinity College of Library in Dublin. And there was a square that depicted Hanwin's blowing the horn and waking the knights and the kings of old. Another square that depicted the gods and the goddesses on the tree of life beneath the hillside in Cork. And now they depicted the tulips of Amsterdam in full bloom. Henwin and Lorna accepted the gift gratefully, with tears in their eyes. They hugged each other and each nun thrice. And there was a celebration before the wedding, properly in honour of all the guests, around a bear and a boat down the historic canals of the historic city of the Dutch Golden Age. The wedding took place on a bright and sunny day. All in attendance were blessed by the breathtaking view of rainbow over the pond, and the Houston Hairpins arrived to witness their leading singer tie the knot in the most breathtaking venue they had ever seen. They said their vows, promising to be each other's light and love for all eternity, forever and ever, throughout the end of time. Sister Blythe said, "You may now kiss the bride," and a roar of happiness rippled throughout the land, and there were many great joys. And after much singing and dancing and partying hard, the nuns were tired. They retired to their lawn chairs on the green, and easily they each fell asleep. After most of the guests had gone, Hanwin went to wake the nuns, gently shaking their shoulders thrice. Yet, despite his persistence, they did not stir, and they still did not stir after Lorna and Pushyami took turns shaking their shoulders, and their skin was cold. "Oh, goodness me," Hanwin shouted back with horror. "I think they might actually be dead." Helga was the nurse and felt the three nuns' pulses. "Oh, I'm sorry, lads," she nodded sadly, "but they're gone." "No!" Lorna threw her arms around them and began to weep. Edmund, with tears in his eyes, gently lifted them back to their feet and hugged them close to his heart. "They were old, hun," soothed Helga, placing a loving hand on Lorna's shoulders. "'Twas just their time. But," Lorna sobbed, "they came all this way with us." "And what a journey they had together," sighed Pushyami, "both with us and each other." She planted a kiss on each of the nuns' foreheads, and when gently laid the handmade quilt across the three of them, and they all hugged each other and cried quietly for some time together. It had been a long time since Kilmacadar Church in Dingle had received three nuns into his parish. On this day, Sister Blythe, Sister Cordelia, and Sister Primrose were delivered into the soil of the churchyard, buried together wrapped in amber and metal coffins for preservation, so as to possibly be resurrected one day once again. And all were in attendance as Henry stood and gave the final eulogy. In honor of these three who were sacrificed in the sanctuary of their church for the protection of their adventure, they who have been our guides from the very beginning, who dedicated themselves honoring the goodness of God and the goodness of others, may their bodies bless this land as their souls have done, so that we may walk on this earth and we will be ever blessed by their presence on the land, the tokens of their wisdom everlasting, whispering through the leaves of the trees, and carried swift and merry upon the wind. We honor thee, and we love thee. May thy rest in the kingdom of heaven, forever and ever. Amen. They lit the torches and tossed the dirt, and then Henwin sang a tune he'd written, a melody of mourning in celebration of life. Put a pin in my possum. 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 Each said their goodbyes by writing a letter in honor of each. One from Henwin to Primrose, Lorna to Cordelia, and Pushyami to Blythe. These letters then were put inside a balloon. Each balloon was thrust up into the heavens, released into the English expanse of the sky. They travelled for some time, just as the nuns themselves had done, and settled in a yard and house in Fort Collins, Colorado, my dear, where a single mother, yearning for babes of her own, discovered the balloons and the letters contained therein. Not knowing the story behind them, as they were not signed, nor where they had come from, she read each letter with tears in her eyes, and placed the letters in frames and hung them on the wall. Almost 3 months later, she would give birth to 3 baby girls, who she lovingly named Blythe, Cordelia, and Primrose, who one day sometime in the not-so-distant future, they would meet a most mysterious and magical woman with the name of Miss Pushyami Gogireddi. And that concludes the first book in our series. And if you like these stories, tell your friends, like and subscribe. And we look forward to seeing you for many more tales to come. We've already written a bit of the second book, and we're looking for a way to share it with you folks. But enjoy the entirety of the tales told on ProfferandProsper.com. And a very happy Mother's Day to all involved.